I think it's getting better. I think there's enough people now who will step forward and say, even though I was a courageous soldier, male or female, black, white, gay, straight, doesn't matter. I know that the process of being immersed in that world of shit has scarred my soul. And it's not just some people can't handle it. And the more we as a culture accept that and recognize the pain that that generates and then the price forward to our culture, the more reluctant we'll be to go for our next high diddle straight up the middle adventure in militarism.
That was my father talking about his experience of PTS and trauma from combat. He's a Vietnam combat veteran and served in the Army from 67 to 68. This episode is a little different. It's just more of a emotional appeal and a reflection on what's been going on in the news. And if you don't want to hear about the political part for the next couple of minutes, you can skip to the end if you want to hear him speak more about his story at all. But I think this part is important. At this point, you've probably heard about the Atlantic article written by Jeffrey Goldberg that states that Trump has disparaged those killed and wounded in combat, called them losers and suckers, asked that wounded veterans be kept out of military parades, and claims to not understand why military members sacrifice for their country. The pushback on this article is that a lot of the sources are anonymous. And how do we trust anonymous sources, especially in this media climate? Thank you, Trump, for the fake news narrative. Of course, he has called it a fake story and lambasted the reporters. So the issue for the people that are denying this story, however, is that elements of it have been confirmed by multiple news sources outside of the Atlantic, including by Fox News. So I guess we're picking and choosing when we believe our media outlets these days. But the reporter Jennifer Griffin, who's the national security correspondent for Fox, said that she had confirmed these elements of the Atlantic article, including that Trump disparaged veterans, didn't want to honor the dead during his cemetery trip abroad, did not want to lower the flags after the death of John McCain. The Washington Post has confirmed the reporting, and James Laporta, who's an AP investigative reporter, confirmed with some senior DoD sources from the U.S. Marine Corps. The New York Times has also confirmed main parts of the story. And one of the elements of this story that is really blowing my mind is the denial Trump has about his comments of John McCain. And the article states, when McCain died in August 2018, Trump told his senior staff, according to 3 sources with direct knowledge of this event, "We're not going to support that loser's funeral." And he became furious when he saw the flags lowered to half staff. What the fuck are we doing that for? The guy was a fucking loser. Trump went on a Twitter rant claiming he never did any of those things, that he never put up a fight at all about the military processional for John McCain or the lowering of the flags. We now have Miles Taylor, who is a former DHS official and a lifelong Republican that worked directly with Trump for 2 years, stating that the president's claims he didn't do that are not true. And Miles went on TV publicly to corroborate this part of the story, saying that he was in Australia during this time and he got a wake-up call in the middle of the night from Trump's staff announcing that he was furious about the flags being at half-mast. Angry that the DHS notified the federal buildings to lower their flags for Senator John McCain, and he says, "I would know because your staff called and told me." The problem here is that Trump's comments on those injured or killed during war are not out of character. So when he tweets, I never called John a loser and swear on whatever or whoever I was asked to swear on that I never called our great fallen soldiers anything other than heroes. This is more made up fake news given by disgusting and jealous failures in a disgraceful attempt to influence the 2020 election. And, okay, anonymous sources, I would love if they came out and confirmed and did not remain anonymous. But the problem here is that Trump is lying. And we know he's lying because he has definitely called McCain a loser on video. In fact, he was so proud of doing so in 2015 that he tweeted a headline of him saying exactly that. That's just a fact. There's no denying it. We have the tape.
I supported him. He lost. He let us down. But, he lost. So I never liked him as much after that because I don't like losers. But Frank, let me get to it. He hit me. He's not a war hero.
He's a war hero.
He's a war hero.
5.5 years.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay? I hate to tell you.
Do you agree with that?
He's a war hero because he was captured.
And it breaks my fucking heart that this is even a conversation, that things have gotten so partisan that behavior like this from the leader of the free world, from our commander-in-chief, is excused because of hatred for the other political party. We see the pattern here when at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Trump was asked to explain, the discrepancy between his comments about the fact that no U.S. service member had been harmed in the Iranian missile attack versus reports that some members of the military had sustained head injuries. And he said, I heard they had headaches and a couple other things, but I would say I can report it's not very, very serious. He also has claimed he's done more for the military than almost anyone else. This is coming from a man who claimed to have bone spurs to avoid the draft and avoid serving in Vietnam. Trump attending the ceremony, okay, if it's a security risk, that's fine. But General Dunford was there. General Kelly was there. I think if Trump really wanted to be there, he would have. But it's larger than him just showing up at a ceremony. This is a fundamental disrespect for service and sacrifice. And the problem that I have is that people are so willing to fall along partisan lines here that even when someone like Miles Taylor comes out as a confirmed source and publicly says this, that's not taken into account. A lifelong Republican publicly confirms this element of the article in The Atlantic. We have video of Donald Trump disparaging John McCain and then tweets where he completely lies about it. So he lied about this on Twitter, but he wants us to believe that he isn't lying about the other stuff, right? That's like me asking you to think that Hillary Clinton somehow loved Trump supporters after her basket of deplorables comment, right? Where we have proof of it, and say instead of her apologizing, she denies it, says she never said that, and claims to love them the most and does the most for them. Really? Would you buy that bullshit? I fought with a Republican loved one of mine today who came after me for buying into the fake media bullshit, apparently, and believing these anonymous sources, even though multiple reports have been confirmed by multiple news sources. And we have video of Trump doing the exact thing that he denied doing. So I brought up the video of Trump disparaging John McCain and said, do you see this discrepancy here? And he said, John McCain was a traitor. And I'm at a loss. I didn't believe in John McCain's policies. But to say the man was a traitor because he went against Donald Trump and did something politically that you don't believe in is the height of partisanship. And yes, I'm very emotional about this and I'm taking it very personally because mine is a military family. I think often about how I feel about my dad and how close we are, how grateful I am for him, how much I respect him as a person. And I just wonder sometimes, if he could have had half of the money or opportunity, power or privilege of someone like Donald Trump, how different his life would have been. My dad was a poor kid who grew up in St. Louis. He was born in 1944, and very few people my age have fathers or parents who are Vietnam combat veterans. So this is a very personal issue for me. And when they do, they often don't dive into the experience as much, or they aren't as emotionally attuned to it. I think part of the reason is because of the trauma my dad endured in combat and his PTS. He really, his words were, he was dead inside. His soul had been killed in war. And it took him a long time to feel human again once he came back. And as we know, soldiers in Vietnam were not received with a warm welcome. He was spat on. He purposely didn't wear his uniform around. And he was so traumatized by that experience that he actually studied to become a therapist to help himself heal. And he since made a career out of working with veterans and first responders as a therapist and substance abuse counselor. He went into the Army through ROTC. That was the only reason he could afford to go to college, so it was a way out for him. It was an opportunity. And he figured that he was going to be drafted anyway, so he thought some agency would be good, and that way he could get an education. He didn't necessarily believe in the cause, and you'll hear him speak on this a little later when I include some interview that I made with him. The president has been disrespecting the military from the day that he decided to be cowardly enough to fake an injury and have someone else go in his place to serve in Vietnam. And the audacity and sheer disrespect he has shown for our service members since is unforgivable, and it's quite harmful. So on Friday, we had tried to stop watching the news every day. That felt unhealthy. But I warned my dad about the reporting that had come out, and I felt he should know. And so the three of us, my mom, dad, and I, sat down and we're watching this reporting, and I said, Dad, do you want to keep watching this? And he was fine. He's pretty stoic about it. He's gotten used to having this man as president over the last couple of years. But when retired U.S. Army Major General Paul Eaton came on with his video response to Trump's comments, and he pulled out the dog tags that were found at the crash site from where his father, who was a fighter pilot, was killed during the Vietnam War in 1969. And he said, our Army, our Navy, our Marine Corps, and our Air Force, our Coast Guard, these are brave men and women. They're not just brave, they're smart and wise. And there was a moment, and I look over and tears are just streaming down my father's face. My mom has her hand over her face, and so I go behind him and I put my arms around his chest, and I stand there trying to comfort him, and I just started sobbing. And this is not me being hyperbolic or emotional to try and gain sympathy or tell some bullshit story. This is real. This is a real lived experience from my father, a man who sacrificed so much for his country. To be disparaged like this is personal, and it's traumatic, and it just re-injures those wounds he's been trying to heal his entire life. He's 76. The man deserves some peace, and he's done a good job to try and heal himself, but PTS often gets worse with age, and our house is covered in books about military history, and we watch films about it often, never before we go to bed at night, because of nightmares. But he's worked really hard to bring himself back to a place of seeing light in life and being able to feel emotionally whole. And none of it is fair, and none of it is right. And so I just asked for a little less partisanship and a little bit more empathy, understanding, support, and comfort. And, we cried and held each other for probably a good 10 or 15 minutes, and then just try to move on with our lives. And that's pain that Donald Trump will never feel and can never understand. I mean, both of my grandfathers served during World War II. My cousin served in the first Gulf War as a Marine. And when my grandfather, my mom's dad, was dying, he had my cousin dress up in his military uniform, come to his bedside, and he gifted my cousin the Nazi flag that he had gotten, that he'd found in Europe during World War II. So instead of going on and on about this article and getting into the weeds with people who probably disagree with me, if you call yourself an American patriot, if you're a veteran or know veterans, if you care about veterans' causes, my question is why, when Trump said those things about John McCain, why was that not it for you? Is it because Democrats really are so evil and terrifying and scary to you? That excuses disparaging a POW as a loser and a traitor? So I want to end with my father speaking about a story he told me during my MFA when I created a project called My Father's War, and then a clip from an amazing piece that we produced while I was at BAM TV called This One's For You from the episode Stand Still. I hope you have a peaceful and healing week, and we'll be back to our regular programming next Monday.
I went to one reunion, just one in Nashville with Doc Odoms, right? And I hadn't been there for half an hour, and this guy walks in. He introduced himself as Pancho in 1967. He was really okay with that. He was such a stand-up guy. I mean, so he came back from Vietnam. He lives down just outside of San Antonio, and he's really had a successful life. And he walks in. I hadn't seen this guy since. So this was, should I remember? It had been 20 years or so, I don't know. So he walks in with his son and his daughter, and they're both, his daughter's a major in the Army, and his son is a lieutenant colonel, and they came with their dad to our reunion, and he introduces me to them, and he turns to them and he says, "This is Lieutenant DeWitt, he's my hero." It was such an honor. And what he was referring to was what we were just talking about, because he knew that I mean, at that point, I hated the Army. I hated the military. I was disgusted by the whole thing. It was a travesty. It was an incredible waste of precious lives and national treasure for absolutely nothing. And I realized the vast majority of the Vietnamese we encountered were incredibly hardworking, incredibly poor, incredibly self-reliant people who had been almost starved to death by the French when the French had control of French Indochina, and then almost starved to death by the Japanese when the Japanese occupied Indochina in 41 or 40. There was a man who was one of my partners at the end, and he died in my arms. And yours, don't leave me on, just tapped right into that for me. It's like, fuck. I mean, we were kind of down toward the end, and I trusted him with my life, and he trusted me with his life. And there were, from our original company of 120, there were probably 10 of us left. And he was gonna, it was his last day in the bush. It was his last day in the bush. And he and I were we got put in a situation by some other people who weren't taking care of their shit. They were absolutely irresponsible. And I turned to him and I said, Dutch, we gotta spread out. And he took 4 steps and was shot by an NVA. It was, and I killed the NVA. It was like one of those things, it's like slow motion, you know. I was moving twice as fast as everything around me. I shot this NVA and I got a machine gun and I went down to where Dutch was and he was dead. And I just, you know, was it worth it? How could that be? You know, how could that be? So there's parts, you know, there's parts of me that I have an intellectual map that gives me some clarity. I've healed because I've been fortunate enough to have the time to try to understand what happened and what's happened to veterans after war after war after war. And I've had the good fortune to have love in my life. And I'll carry it, just like your grandfather, I'll carry the pain of this to my grave. It's just the way it is. And nobody escapes that. It doesn't matter how noble your purpose or how disciplined you are.
This whole world pushed you to the edge. Nobody knows all the pain you shouldered on your own. Here's hoping you haven't made up your mind. This world can be so unkind. There's another way down. Turn around. Come with me inside. Listen to the sound of my voice. It's alright. It's okay. That ain't water down there. A man can't fly on his own through thin air. It's cold concrete beneath your